you hear us?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great.
Hooray. Okay. And you don't have like a crazy echo or anything?
No, it sounds good.
Amazing. We're already doing better than last night. I'm so excited. Okay. Well, welcome. We are so excited to have you join us for our Heroes and Villains Club so we can talk more about your spectacular Superman Space Age.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey into comics?
Yeah. My name is Mark Russell, and I have been working in comics since about 2015. I'd written a couple books before then that were not comic related. But I started working in comics in 2015, and I never really found a good reason to leave. I feel like comics just work better with the way my brain works, that I think of stories visually when I'm telling them. So comics is just a really great medium for that. And also, it's a lot cheaper and easier to get a comic book approved than it is to get a movie or a TV show. So it's just a great way to tell sort of daring stories in a visual medium that you can't really do in other formats. But yeah, I got, like I mentioned, I got my start with Prez in 2015, and based on that, I was given the Flintstones, which was run by DC as part of their Hanna-Barbera line, and that's really the one that got me a career in comics. That one was a hit, and I never and I just started getting more comics work after that. But I've always sort of wanted to work with characters like Superman that have had a bigger impact on me when I was a kid, and characters that meant a lot to me when I was younger. So I'm just really gratified that I got a chance to actually work with a character like Superman.
Yeah, I think the first thing of yours I read was the Snagglepuss Chronicles, which is a forever favorite. But I would love to chat a little bit more about sort of the evolution of this story. Was this something you pitched, or was it something where DC came to you? Sort of, how did this book come to be?
Well, there was a short-lived initiative within DC to move to what they called the 5G model, where G standing for generation, where they're going to have different generations of heroes running simultaneously. And I was approached to write the 2G Superman. So it'd be the Superman in the second generation, which was the 1960s. And this was my pitch for that this would be like that Superman living in the 1950s. Now, when the 5G thing at DC fell apart, they said, we still really want to do your Superman. We just can't really do it as, within this 5G anything anymore. So, but what would you think about writing a Superman story that tied into the Crisis on Infinite Earths, in which pretty much every other universe except for ours is destroyed in 1985? And I thought that's a great idea because I like having a firm ending point. But I think it would be more interesting to write it from the perspective of one of the universes that didn't make it. So that became my pitch for Superman's Space Age, that it's a historic version of Superman living in a world that's pretty much just like ours, against the backdrop of history, with the idea that this is one of the universes that doesn't make it and gets destroyed in the Crisis on Infinite Earths and comes to an abrupt end in 1985. And so that was really the genesis of the idea.
And what is it like writing characters that have such a rich history while also sort of putting your own fingerprint on the characters themselves?
Yeah, it's great. And I think that the thing I really like about writing characters that have a great deal of cultural equity already built into them, like Superman or the Flintstones or Snagglepuss, is that you don't have to explain to people who this character is. You don't have to waste a lot of time, getting to know your audience. People already know who Superman is or what he's supposed to be like. So you can get right into his thoughts and his actions and what's going on in the story. And also, people who might not know you as a writer or as an artist will take a chance on something you've written just because it's Superman or a character they're familiar with. So I always really like working with characters that have a baked-in audience.
Yeah, and you mentioned artists. I mean, the Allreds have such a distinct style that clearly lends just like perfectly to this story. What was that sort of creative process like with you?
Well, when I originally thought Mike Allred would be perfect for this book, I was originally thinking this was just going to take place in the 1960s. And I thought, well, who would be better for bringing the 1960s to life than Mike Allred? He did Batman 66. He does like the David Bowie book. I think there's really no one better at bringing that sort of cosmic, sort of counterculture look to life. But one thing that kind of surprised me when we started working together on this was just how sort of deeply emotional his character rendering was. About how it's not just about capturing, the bright colors and bold lines of this simpler past, but also these characters have a lot of nuance. They, have a lot of emotional tonality in their faces, and to me, that really is kind of what made the story come to life. Because this is ultimately a story about people hanging on to things they know they're going to lose.
Did you realize that Allred was the perfect person to draw Pariah? Like, this was the character he was meant to draw with like the goth like eyeliner look. I mean, it was perfect. As soon as Pariah was on the page, I was like, "Yep, this was." I was wondering if that was. It was nice to hear the answer to that, because I was like, "Oh, I would have taken Allred for how Pariah looked right off the bat." It was perfect, absolutely perfect.
Yeah, no, Pariah is just a perfect example of how he was just the right guy for this, because it'd be so easy to make Pariah wrong or to make him uninteresting. But right away when you see him, you're like, I want to know more about that guy. I want to hear that guy's story. It's such a cool look that he gave Pariah, and still keeping it recognizably as Pariah. And I think that one of the sort of recurring comments we've got in the series is like, I never really cared about Pariah before, but this made me suddenly sort of care about him, or made me sort of think about him as a three-dimensional character. So I'm happy to report he also plays a big role in Batman Dark Age, and will probably be a character in each version of this series that we do.
Yes, it is. Actually, just play off that. I was wondering, because I'm reading Dark Age, and it's great, and Pariah is also great in that. I was wondering if this means that maybe there will be a Wonder Age or something for Wonder Woman, or
we are pitching. We've already pitched Wonder Woman Golden Age as the third and possibly final entry in the series. Although if they let us, I'm sure we do Flash, the Fast Age, or whatever, or Green Lantern, the Out Age. I don't know. Yeah, I'll do them. I'll work with Mike and Laura on these as long as they'll let me.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I felt like Wonder Woman really stood out too in certain parts of Space Age, and I was like, I'm ready for her story too.
Yeah, and the story we have for her like dovetails with the first two, but is also very different in that it would be about her like having to lead this world that they cobble together out of the ashes of these destroyed universes. So it'd be like she's the one sort of left to sort of show the Justice League how to rebuild society. And I think it would borrow heavily from her memories on Earth. And I really hope we get to do it, because I think it'd be the perfect sort of like end chapter to this story.
Yeah, that'd be great.
No, please, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Mark, I have so many questions for you. I love all of your work. And one of the things too for that I really like, because not just for Space Age, but for Dark Age, for Rumpus Room, for Prez, you have you're really good at showing these really dark traits and selfish traits for humanity, and then you either balance or you cut it with humanity's better traits, whether it's humor or compassion or something like that. And I was just wondering if that's your own personal outlook, if it's you feel like that is what you feel best applies to comic book storylines, or I was just curious about that. And one of the things too that really stood out to me was for the first issue of Rumpus Room, and I won't remember exactly, but you had a letter to the readers in the very back, and I remember reading it and being like, he really gets it, and just it was like a really touching letter, and it really made me feel like, I don't know, that you at least kind of believe that humanity can be good and do good things. But I just wasn't sure, again, how you felt about those aspects of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, I write a lot about sort of the worst aspects of humanity, but I never want to write about his hopelessness. I never want to write about like, well, the game's over and they've won. I always want to say it doesn't have to be this way. We are complex beings, and how much we've ever screwed up, we can always choose to change. We can always choose to do something different. And in fact, there are people who are doing just that. I think what I really want is for us to envision a just society which goes beyond our immediate interests. Because I think, people think, well, as long as society works for me in this way and I can live with it, then what do I care? But I think we should be thinking about like what was a society that we would want to live in if we didn't know starting tomorrow whether we were going to be a billionaire or we didn't know if we were going to be you know, uh, someone working in a sweatshop or a child born in poverty. If we didn't know tomorrow what we were going to be, what would be the civilization we would want to create so that we would be okay living there, regardless of how we live, what role we played in it tomorrow. And I think that's really the task to think beyond our immediate sort of self-interest or the lives that we lead right now and think about, well, what would we want if we were somebody else, or if were someone less fortunate than ourselves. And I think that's the question we don't ask ourselves enough. And I think that's one of the advantages of writing in comics and science fiction and whatnot, is that you can sort of give people a brain transplant in a lot of ways. You can make them see the world through the eyes of one of these characters, make them see the world through other people and think about the world as it needs to work for them, and not just whether or not they're okay with things the way they are because they can currently afford to get a $6 Starbucks coffee every morning.
Yeah, I love actually your portrayal of society, like commercialism and capitalism and stuff, where it's usually pretty smothering and very funny. Like in Prez or in One Star Squadron, which was actually the first thing I read by you, which I was like totally fell in love with, where just everything just like, especially Prez, where you're just getting blasted with ads at all times, and I love that also that outlook on society, how it's everywhere and it's hard to avoid, and at times it seems kind of extreme and funny, and then you realize like, actually it's pretty true. So
yeah, Prez was actually written 10 years ago, and I'm kind of surprised, like, because they re-released it recently as a YA formatted book, and so I had to go through and read it and sort of re-edit it a little bit, and I was kind of surprised at how much of it, which seemed really wild then, actually seems like is actually kind of happening now. Stuff about AI and sort of drone warfare and stuff is like, that's just sort of not even science fiction anymore. And I ascribe that less to my own prophetic powers than to just how screwed up the world has gotten in the last 10 years. But I feel like this is what science fiction ultimately does when or what it's supposed to do, is sort of be the canary in the coal mine to let us know we're sick and possibly dying, and these are the symptoms. And unfortunately for Press, the symptoms just seem to be getting worse.
Yeah, I would have loved more of Prez.
Me too. Yeah, originally I was planning that for 12 issues, and they canceled it after 6. So I kind of felt like I got to tell half a story. Maybe we'll go back at some point and do the other half, but it's still one of my regrets in comics. Both that I didn't get to tell the whole story, and that I wasn't smart enough to know that a comic book could get canceled, and that I needed to, have a good ending point in mind at issue 6 if I didn't already.
You brush up against a lot of historical moments in this book with Watergate and things like that. Were there any that got left on the cutting room floor that you wanted to have these characters interact with that you didn't get a chance to?
Yeah, there was actually a lot that got left on the cutting room floor. I wanted to have a whole storyline about the AIDS epidemic. I wanted to have a storyline about I want to have more of a storyline about the Vietnam War. Luckily, I got to do the Vietnam War thing in Batman Dark Age. And I tried to actually move the AIDS epidemic storyline from Superman Space Age to Batman Dark Age. But again, the hard thing about including the AIDS epidemic is that it happens sort of right at the end of the story. So coming in right at the same time you're having to sew up all of the other sort of historic or all the other storylines from the entire book. So unfortunately, the events in the 80s kind of got less attention than the historic events in the 60s and the 70s. But this is what I ultimately wanted it to be, both Superman Space Age and Batman Dark Age, to be a superhero story told against the backdrop of very real world history. To make, even though it's like a different universe, make this universe seem more like our own than any other universe in comics.
And actually, with your talk about the Vietnam War and Dark Age, I was wondering if you, because in this you have, John Kent's war stories, and in Dark Age you have Bruce Wayne and Al Ghul and the whole Vietnam War. And I was wondering if you like read up on war stories, or if there was something in particular that like drew you to that. I was just curious about that.
Well, I feel like in a lot of ways it's hard to talk about the Cold War or talk about the post-war era without talking at least a little bit about World War II, because it was such like this sort of Cambrian extinction event in like 20th century history. To be sort of like, talking about the dinosaurs, without talking about the comet that destroys them, And so I wanted to do that. Plus, the people in charge in that world in the 60s were people who fought in World War II, and they were all kind of like in that mindset, like you've got to you can't appease, you've got to take people to the brink, and you got to like fight evil wherever you find it, which was a very good idea to have in the 40s when you were opposing Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, but it could be downright deadly in the 60s when you're commanding a nuclear arsenal. So I felt like in a lot of ways I had to talk about World War II just in order to talk about the Cold War, but also the fact that like Jonathan Kent and General Lane, like both the fathers of like Clark Kent and Lois Lane, had fought in this war, meant that they would give them a perspective, or that they would have an understanding of what their parents had sacrificed, and that would inform their own characters.
Looks like one of the comic book club members who couldn't be here said Green Lantern should be called Emerald Age.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm not above stealing that, by the way. So
I'm sure he'd be honored if you stole it.
I have a question about the because I love the store pun names for like Siegel and Schuster.
Oh, you caught that. Good. Yeah, I was just wondering if people were going to get that Easter egg.
Yeah. So my question is, would you and the Allreds have pun stores? If somebody, what would your pun stores be?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I do not have an answer prepared for that. I don't know. I'd have to come back to that. But yeah, now I'm going to be thinking for the rest of the night in terms of pun store.
So in addition to the pun stores, excuse me, there are some other Easter eggs. Is there anything you think we might have missed? Oh my God. Popcorn. Popcorn kernel. Excuse me.
Well, Mike put a lot of little Easter eggs in there, like people in the background a lot of times, some of which are historical figures, some of which are just people that he knows. So sometimes I'll be at like a party at his house, like a Halloween party or something, and I'll see someone, and I'll think, I know that person from somewhere. And then it occurs to me, it's like, oh, this is the guy in the background in Superman Space Age who's just like looking up at the sky for no good reason. Or, it's like I've sort of like told him like this character is based on like what's a good example? There's a lawyer character in Superman Space Age who may or may not, I cannot confirm nor deny, he is based on Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer who defended both O.J. Simpson and the guy who Reversal of Fortune is based on, the movie. Klaus von Bülow. He defended both Klaus von Bülow and O.J. Simpson. Defended, notorious and probably guilty wife murderers, and he's the one defending Lex Luthor in Superman Space Age.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Use the word allegedly loosely.
Yeah.
Kind of to the same question as the historic moment question, you got to do your own takes in this book of different versions of DC characters. I really like your take on the Flash, who's, just kind of bored all the time because he's moving so quick. But were there any characters you wanted to show a version of in this world that you didn't get a chance to, or didn't get as much space to as you wanted to?
Yeah, I think that one character who really got sort of cheated in this was Aquaman, because I wanted to talk about like how much better it was underneath the ocean, or about how he was really sort of the most powerful person on the planet because he ruled 78% of the Earth's surface. I wanted to have, but there just wasn't room to have these lines in. So a lot of times he's just sitting around at the table in the Hall of Justice, not actually saying something what it looks like he should be, which is maybe again part of his complaint. It's like, oh, he's third banana once again.
Of the characters that you did get to include, of which it's fun because this is certainly a Superman story, but you also get such a strong Batman story, and you have moments where it feels like a Wonder Woman story. Is there one, and certainly a Lois Lane, a fantastic Lois Lane story, but is there a character whose voice you heard the loudest or the most clear while you were sort of tapping into these characters?
Well, I thought the three characters, other than Superman, who I thought are really going to sort of, mold the structure of the story, not only the structure of the story, but of Superman himself, were, Jonathan Kent, his father, Lois Lane, his, wife, and Jor-El. And I think that he learns very different things from each of them. Like he learns wisdom from Pa Kent, and he learns like ambition, or he learns who he is from Jor-El. But I think he learns courage from Lois Lane, because she's not immortal, she's not superpowered, and yet she's throwing herself into the world's most dangerous situations as a journalist. And I think those are the three people, more than anyone else, who have really had a huge impact on his life.
Is there one of those that you enjoyed writing the most?
Well, I think Lois Lane is, after Superman, is probably my favorite character in the book, because she does so much of just the talking through her journalism. She's the one whose articles are actually, we see far more of Lois Lane's writing in the book than we do of Clark Kent's, because I think she's just a better, more capable journalist. And so I feel like in a lot of ways she was my favorite character to write, because it allowed me to, basically write my thoughts about, these events that she's talking about, and just sort of use her as like a conduit to sort of channel my opinions. And in fact, the story that she has about being in jail with the civil rights leader, that is actually based upon a story that Congressman John Lewis told me one time when we were at a dinner together, celebrating the release of his book March, which came out at the same time as one of my books, so not the same publisher. So we were in line at they basically served us a Chinese buffet, and so we were in line in this Chinese buffet, and he told the story about how they used to fill up on Chinese food before a lunch counter sit-in, because they knew they weren't going to get lunch at the lunch counter sit-in, and in fact they knew they were probably going to spend the rest of the night in jail with nothing else to eat for the rest of the day. So it was a tradition for them to go into a Chinese restaurant and just fill up, just have as much as they could eat, knowing that it would probably be a while before they got to eat again. And the thought of like this delicious Chinese food, waiting for them at each lunch counter sit-in, gave them something to sort of look forward to. It gave them something to get them through, knowing that they were going to be arrested and probably beaten up and then thrown into like an iron cell with no food for the next 24 hours.
It's incredible. Do you have questions for me?
So I mean, you're hopefully going to get to write the Trinity if you get the Wonder Woman Golden Age, which is awesome. Like I said, my first exposure to you was One Star Squadron, and I'd never seen anyone at that point like focusing on Red Tornado and all these other minor characters, and I love it when writers are able to do that, and it's so organic and just excellent. And I was wondering, are there any characters that you would be really excited to write? Anyone where you're like, I kind of have a story for them and I just haven't been able to tell it, or something like that? Or even if it's one that you've already written where you're like, I have another story ready to go for this one.
I feel like one I've written that's a character I've wanted to write for a long time, and I felt like it just sort of fell through the cracks or wasn't published in like the most conducive format to getting a large readership, was Ace, Batman's dog. I wrote a storyline for Batman Urban Legends, which was about Batman being captured and Ace being captured, and Ace being held in a kennel and Batman being held by this Russian mobster, and like Ace having to escape the kennel and save Batman. And I feel like that's a story I really think is maybe one of the best things I've written, especially for DC, and a character that I've just always kind of loved. And if DC gave me some wishes, one of them would be to pull that story out of mothballs and republish it as its own thing.
Yeah, that was a tough read with the animal cruelty, but very, very well done. Yeah, it was great.
Does that tap your list?
What's that?
Do you have more? Does that tap your list?
Good.
Okay, I'm just good.
Yeah.
Mark, can I ask what you're the most proud of from this book, from Superman Space Age?
Yeah, I think the what I'm most proud of is probably the ending, how well everything came together, and how stunning the art is. A lot of it looks like, to me, like murals that should be hanging up in a museum somewhere. Just the way Mike did like double page spreads and splash pages and stuff just looks phenomenal. And I think also it's probably one of the best pure endings I've ever come up with, where it all sort of fits together and makes sense and is still sort of surprising.
Yeah, I love it. It looks like you're tucked into that sort of epic conclusion battle as well. Is that you at the bottom with your glasses?
Yeah, that's right. That's me. I'm one of the Easter eggs. In fact, when people ask me to sign the book, usually I sign the inside cover by my own head.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's awesome.
Are there more Easter eggs that we missed?
I'm sure there are. I can't really think of any off the top of my head, but there's like people that show up, or just sort of little things in the background, like little signs. Oh, another one. There's a scene where Superman is saving a ship, and it's the Edmund Fitzgerald, which I don't know if you're Gordon Lightfoot fans, but it was a reference to the song "The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald," which was actually about an actual shipwreck. So in that, he saves the actual Edmund Fitzgerald from going down.
One of the same person who gave you Emerald Age, who wants a 10% commission, is asking if you could remove one DC character from all continuity, who would it be? And his parentheticals is just, why is it Punchline, which I also agree with, but yours doesn't have to be Punchline, I guess.
I don't. I think Punchline would be a bad choice just because so new. It's not very much continuity to remove a character from. But I think it would be interesting if you were to say remove. It's not so much that you don't like the character. I just think this would really shake things up. Like in fact, one of my favorite characters is Lex Luthor. But I think if you imagined DC continuity without Lex Luthor, it would look very different. I'm not suggesting that we remove Lex Luthor from DC continuity, but I think that's the sort of thing I would want to go for. Maybe I might actually say Hal Jordan. And again, it's nothing against Hal Jordan. It's just that I think this would, if you didn't have the Lantern Corps and you didn't have the Lantern Corps governing the galaxy, it would be a much rougher place. It'd be much more like a Wild West. And so I'm going to say Hal Jordan / the Lantern Corps.
What would Earth do without one of its 12 Green Lanterns?
Yeah.
11 is just too few.
Yeah.
Even cool even doesn't.
Right.
Amazing. Do folks have other questions? Did you ask them all?
Yeah, you have your
I'm just
questions.
gonna do my wrap-up
Yeah,
questions.
those are great. Though.
You just want those? Okay, great. Mark, are you able to share any information about upcoming projects you might have, other than the obviously Dark Age, which we love, and then some hopeful?
Prez.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy about the fact that Prez is getting this YA edition, because not only is it like a cool, they let me go through and sort of rewrite some of it, and make the lines a little tighter, which I was really happy about. But it's in this really cool format that fits inside like a kid's backpack.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem with traditional graphic novels. They're huge and they don't really fit well. It's like you can't. They seem like they're made more for adult collectors than for kids to read. But the Prez YA format is made specifically for kids to read. It fits on the shelf next to all their manga titles, and it's only $10. So I feel like that's a win-win, where I'm going to get a lot more people reading that book, and it's a lot more affordable and easier to carry around for someone who wants to read it. So I'm really happy about that. In addition to that, I've got a few other things coming out. I've got it hasn't been announced yet, but I'm going to tell you. I've got my first ever series with Dark Horse, and it's about a silent film comedian, loosely based on the life of Buster Keaton. It's called Lucky Ham, and it reunites me with Mike Feehan, who did the art on Snagglepuss. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm also doing a sci-fi anthology series with Mad Cave. We're going to call it Vanishing Point. And it's sort of like my Twilight Zone, where each issue is a completely different story, often with big twists at the end. So, and originally I wanted to do it black and white, like Twilight Zone, but they sort of talked me out of that. And I'm glad they did, because the color just looks gorgeous on it. But it's sort of my Twilight Zone. So I'm really excited for that too. And it's called Vanishing Point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't wait for this.
Have you been reading any comics or graphic novels lately that you've been enjoying?
Yeah, no, I've been reading a few. I've been reading my favorite thing is Monsters, the second volume, which is a massive tome and well worth the read. I've been loving it. I love the first volume. And I think I love this one even more. And I've been reading the biographies. I'm going to forget the name of the writer artist who did it, but the biographies of both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Gosh, I forget the artist's name, but those are also really good. And I like and also feel very journalistic. Like they're not just taking people at face value, but they're giving everyone a say, which is sort of cool to see a graphic novel written that way. But those are the ones I'm really enjoying right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, we were. Emil Ferris is incredible, and it was a long wait and well worth it for volume 2 of my favorite.
I agree. I think that there needs to always be people like Emil Ferris working on these types of projects, which you might not see for 3 or 4 years. Sort of like Pink Floyd releasing an album, where it's like, well, this feels like an album it took 3 years to make.
Yeah, totally.
This feels like a book that it would take 3 years to make. And I work very much in the other end of the spectrum, where it's like I need to be working on 4 series at the same time and always have things coming out. So it's nice to see that there are people and that there are projects that the industry is big enough to accommodate the exact opposite of that, where it's like, no, we'll get 600 pages from you at some point in 2030.
Yeah, that's amazing. She is definitely incredible.
Yeah, it just looks mind-boggling too. I mean, the fact that it's all done with ballpoint pens, I think I just can't say enough good things about that book.
Yeah, agreed. Did you have a good San Diego Comic-Con?
Yeah, no, I had a great time at San Diego Comic-Con. And I think for me, the key to having a really good San Diego Comic Con is to spend as little time sitting behind a table as possible. Yeah, just be out walking around, mingling, talking to people, doing parties and meetings, and running into people at the tiki bar. That's really what San Diego kind of means to me now, is sort of random encounters. Or one thing I really like doing is the Creators Assemble roundtable, where people like myself, like more sort of like old fogies who've been in the industry for a little while, get to talk to young creators or people who are trying to find out how to make it work in comics. And we do these roundtables and talk to them, and I always find it as informative as I'm sure they do. So I have it makes me hopeful for the future to see so many eager and capable people that actually still want to do comics, even though we're all kind of getting screwed.
Yeah, that's definitely one of our favorite things. The energy and excitement for comics as a medium is so palpable. We talk about it a little bit like summer camp. Like, it's a lot of people who love each other or who love at least comics coming together in the same place. And it's so cool to see, teenagers waiting in line to show their favorite artist their portfolio, or, grabbing a coffee with a writer they really admire and running pitches or meeting with publishers. So, it's a cool place to be.
But yeah, I always love San Diego, and it's for that reason. It's because I don't feel like I'm big enough to get sucked into the corporate media game. So for me, it's mostly about corn dogs and conversations, with people at random locations.
If you ever start a podcast, I hope you call it Corn Dogs and Conversations.
Oh, perfect.
See, fabulous.
Full of ideas.
Yeah. And Prez is Corn Dog in Chief, right?
There you go.
Something like
it
that.
Was.
Yeah.
One of the things about the reboot is they allowed me to rename it because they thought, well, this is not really, it's a little outdated. So, and I think the name I came up with for this one was way better, which was Setting a Dangerous President.
Yes, which is great. Such a good title.
Mark, do you have any questions for us? You certainly don't have to, but if you do.
Yeah. So, is this a weekly thing? Do you meet like this on a weekly basis, or how often do you meet?
So we meet monthly. So every month we all So we have 3 sort of themed book clubs. So we have a queer book club and a horror and mystery club, and then this is our superhero club. And each one meets monthly, and we all read the same book together, and then we always invite the creator to join us.
Wow, that sounds great.
Gotten to have some fun chats with Kelly Sue DeConnick and G. Willow Wilson and Joshua Williamson, and all for the superhero club. But
those are all great people. Yeah, I'm flattered that you would have me, and it sounds like a really big club that you're able to like sort of divide it like that. I mean, it just sounds like it's really, people are really, into it.
Yeah, we're really lucky to be in a space and a time with lots of other people who love comics and want to devour and talk about them as much as we do. So we love getting to do this every month. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and we're so excited that you could join us. Thank you for making the time to do that.
This was so much fun, really. I mean, I'm just honored that I got a chance to talk to you all.
Yeah, if you ever make it out this way towards Baltimore, I know sometimes people sneak into Baltimore Comic Con. We'd certainly always love to have you in person.
I would love that. In fact, Baltimore, I've never done Baltimore Comic Con, but it's on my short list. In fact, I think next year I'm probably going to skip New York and do Baltimore, because that's always been kind of the problem, is that it's so close to New York, and I'm almost always doing New York. But everyone tells me that Baltimore is the one I got to go to.
Yeah, you are certainly not the first person we've heard say like, oh, if Baltimore and New York weren't so close in time and geography, a lot of folks don't get to go to both. So yeah, but
maybe I'm choosing the wrong one. Maybe I should be doing Baltimore and not New York.
Baltimore's a lot more intimate. You get to do a lot more chatting with folks, and a lot of what you were describing you really love about San Diego is sort of all the time at Baltimore.
Yeah,
so.
And that's like almost the opposite of New York, where it's like once the convention ends, it's like everyone just sort of disappears into the woodwork. So it's like Cinderella or something. Everyone becomes a pumpkin again. everyone just sort of disappears into, they get swallowed up by the city the moment the convention ends for the day.
Yeah, it is enormous to wade through while it's happening, and then dissipates quickly. So well, certainly, if Baltimore ends up on your dance card,
I would love to come do a live appearance and do the Baltimore Comic Con too.
Nice. Did you have any other questions for us, Mark?
No, but I just want to thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. It looks like a great place too, just looking online. It looks like great.
Yeah, you're hanging out with us in the front in our little coffee shop cafe area. So
speaking of someone who like almost lives in a coffee shop, because I do so much of my writing in coffee shops, that looks like a particularly good one.
Well, thank you. We like to think so. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get to have you here soon.
I would love that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate you.
Thank you all. It's good seeing you all.
Thank
Thank
you. Have a good night.